It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're wrapping up the month of October 2006 by taking a look at 5 movies, including the latest Saw film. We also have Tim Robbins and Derek Luke in a film from the director of Clear and Present Danger, a couple of an awards contender, I should say, with Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu's Babel, a very interesting, controversial documentary that came out, and a movie that I only remember from one of the stupidest things I've ever seen in my life, but I love every minute of it. But we'll delve into that as we go along here. But let's talk about the biggest new release of the weekend, which is Saw 3.
Pain. It's part of the puzzle. Blood. It's the price of freedom. Get me out of here! Death. It's not that easy. Saw 3. Suffering. You haven't seen anything yet. Rated R.
It's funny, that's what most people say after they see every new Saw movie. Suffering, you haven't seen Suffering yet. This is Saw 3, the third installment of the Saw series, as this has become the Halloween tradition of the 2000s, when you have Tobin Bell once again playing John Kramer, known as the Jigsaw Killer, who forces his victims to participate in deadly games in order to test their will to live. He puts a man named Jeff, played by Angus McFadden, through a series of tests of his ability to forgive after Jeff's son was killed by a drunk driver. Meanwhile, John's apprentice Amanda, Shawnee Smith, has kidnapped a doctor named Lynn, who is tasked her with keeping John, who is bedridden with terminal cancer, and alive long enough for Jeff to complete his game. And certainly a very, I'm not even going to say interesting movie, because it really is not. Let's be honest, the only reason we go to these Saw movies anymore is to see what kind of crazy new contraptions they can put together to start killing people with. The traps, like I said before, with the other Saw movies, are the reasons why people kept coming back to these movies. And they come out around Halloween, people are looking for a good scary movie, and boom, there you go. And yeah, the story, nobody really cares about the story, because the story doesn't really evolve as these films go along here. I mean, not until we get to later on down the road. There's only a little bit of evolution with Amanda and Jigsaw, but even then, it's not until we get to the later movies when they were trying to save the series in general. Just recently, we had the last Saw movie that probably did it the best overall in terms of giving us a story that advances the character all along, but these movies early on, they were just there for just to see what kind of cool new traps they would set up here. And yeah, the traps can be interesting too. I mean, we had a lot of these movies back in the 80s, you know, the Jason, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. Nobody was really going to see those movies to get an advancement of a story or anything. No, they want to see the cool, fun ways that these horror movie icons are going to kill people. And yeah, these are very cool ways to kill people. I mean, these are very fun, creative traps that keep us invested in the films in general. But if you're going into these movies looking for a story in general, you really are looking in the wrong place for that one. But as far as the film itself goes, it's fine. I mean, it's like the other movies in general. You're only going in there to see the kills, and yeah, sometimes the kills can be very cool. This is the one horror sequel that does gory better than something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, because there is at least some enjoyment factor to it, even though it is grotesque and sometimes and looks very real. I mean, they do a good job of using practical effects to make this work in general. And I think this is the one where they have this one really cool shot where, you know, somebody's getting thrown through a window, and then it immediately cuts to a scene where it immediately cuts to a scene where they're in a police station, and it's all done in one shot. It's like a behind the scenes footage where they're shooting the scene, and like somebody's getting thrown through a window, and then the very next scene is somebody walking into a police station office. And I don't know if it's this movie or the next one, but it's a really cool shot overall. I'm kind of curious myself now. Hold on one second. Okay, it was Saw 4, so I'm not going to talk about it in this particular review. I'll save that for the next one. But going back to Saw 3 in general, it is what it is. I mean, you go into these movies, you either know what you're going to get, and if you don't get what you think you're going to get, you're going to come out disappointed. If you go in there knowing you're not going to get much of a story, and you're just going in there for the traps, you'll have a good time. Other than that, I'd say skip it. For me, knowing what I'm going into, I thought it was alright. So yeah, a decent review overall. But then again, I've never been that big of a fan of the Saw films in general. But I go in there knowing what I'm going to get, and I come out feeling okay about them for the most part. We'll eventually get to the the real good ones as we get down the road here. But with all that said, let's go ahead and move on to the next movie we have here, and that is Catch a Fire.
When they punished him for a crime,
We have to ask your husband some questions.
he didn't commit.
What kind of man are you?
He became
I will make this right.
everything they feared. A rare combination of heart-pounding excitement
Ready to die. Yes, come on.
and a great human story.
You still want to go on? My family was punished for nothing, so let it be for something now.
An explosive real-life thriller.
Go.
From the director of Clear and Present Danger, Catch a Fire.
So this is a political thriller. It's a real-life story of a South American hero's journey to freedom, and in the country's turbulent and divided times in the 1980s, Patrick Chamusso, played by Derek Luke, is an oil refinery foreman and soccer coach who was apolitical until his wife, Precious, and him are jailed, and Patrick is stunned into action against the country's oppressive rating system, even as Police Colonel Nick Voss, played by Tim Robbins, further insinuates himself in the Camusso's lives. And I think I'm pronouncing that name correctly, and if I'm not, I'm sorry. But my first overall reaction to this when I first saw it was just like, this reminds me a lot of that Sean Penn, Denzel Washington movie Cry Freedom, which came out in the 1980s. And that's the first thing I ever took from this movie when I first saw it. It was just like, yeah, this reminds me of that movie that movie Cry Freedom, which was directed by Richard Attenborough, which pretty good movie overall, criminally underrated. If you haven't seen it, definitely check that one out. And you could say the same thing about this movie, too. This is directed by Philip Noyce, who has made a living making these really good Jack Ryan movies. The Clear and Present Danger, Patriot Games. I mean, he's made a lot of really good films overall. He's made a lot of good, fun action movies as a whole. This one, I think, is very much an underrated movie of his. It kind of came and went, didn't really leave much of a lasting impact overall. And overall, it was a movie that didn't really leave a lasting impact. But I remember watching it, and it was just kind of like, this isn't that bad of a movie. In fact, I would say it's a really good movie. It's a very interesting, different take on a political thriller set in a place that you don't usually expect to see something like this happen in. And it's benefiting by two really strong performances by Derek Luke, who was, of course, an Antoine Fisher, and Tim Robbins, who, what more do you say about his career? I mean, this is a guy that, went from starring in comedies like Bull Durham and, going from those type of films to becoming a really damn good actor as a whole, a damn good dramatic actor. Just a lot of good things about this movie as a whole. Definitely a very underrated movie. One I'd recommend checking out if you're looking for a really good political thriller that's unusual for what you're used to seeing. This is one that's definitely worth checking out. I highly recommend it. Catch a Fire. With that said, let's go ahead and move on to another awards contender this year, and that is Alejandro González Iñárritu's Babel.
Rated R. Now playing in select theaters everywhere Friday.
So in this movie, you've got 4 interlocking stories, so it's kind of an anthology film, connected by a single gun coverage at the end to reveal a complex, tragic story of the lives of humanity around the world and how we truly aren't all that different. You have the story that takes place in Morocco, where a troubled married couple played by Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett are on vacation to work out their differences. Meanwhile, a Moroccan herder buys a rifle for his sons so they can keep the jackals away from his herd. A girl in Japan, dealing with rejection, her mother's death, and her father's emotional distance, her own self-conscious, and a disability, deals with modern life in the enormous metropolis of Tokyo, Japan. And on the other side of the world, the married couple's Mexican nanny takes the couple's 2 children with her to her son's wedding in Mexico, only to meet trouble on the return trip. Combined, it provides a powerful story and an equally powerful looking glass into the lives of seemingly random people around the world, and it just shows how connected we truly are. And yeah, it's a film that is very, very unique in the way it's telling a story. It's a different kind of anthology film with a lot of really good talent involved in here. Brad Pitt, Cate Blanchett are very good in this. Adriana Barraza is very good. Gael Garcia Bernal, Elle Fanning, Michael Pena is also in here. Rinko Kikuchi. Just a lot of really good talent as a whole in this film. And this is a very different film from Alejandro González Iñárritu, who, of course, would later be known for directing some really good movies with The Revenant and Birdman. Some of them would go on to win Best Picture. And it's a very interesting film. It's kind of a precursor, if you will, to something like Vantage Point, which tried to do this kind of thing in a more mainstream line and put it into one setting, which I thought worked okay, but not the best overall. But this is a really good movie. It's definitely one of Inarritu's more underappreciated films, especially now considering what he's been doing nowadays. But it's definitely a film that's worth checking out. So I highly recommend checking Babel out. Not much more to say about that one. With that said, let's move on to the next movie here, and it is it's a very interesting film, if you will. Let's take a look at the documentary called Death of a President.
I remember the president said something to me like, "Is there a problem?" I remember saying, "No, sir, there's no problem."
We're just rounding up people. We had probable cause.
That was a major security breach. This time, it seemed to me there was real hate. He looked at me and he stepped out.
We're just getting reports of a shooting incident. It's not clear if the president himself has been hit, but apparently there are casualties.
I should mention that this was made in Britain, so they couldn't get anybody in America for making this movie because it wasn't made by anybody in America, but it was released by Newmarket Films, the company that put out Passion of the Christ, by the way. But as you can see, this is a mockumentary, if you will. Not really a documentary, but it's a mockumentary about the fictional assassination of the then President George W. Bush on October 19th, 2007, a year from when this movie came out, a year before this movie came out, year after this movie came out, I should say, but in Chicago, Illinois. And the film presents it as a future history docudrama and uses actors, archival video footage, as well as computer-generated special effects to present the hypothetical aftermath that the event had on civil liberties, racial profiling, journalistic sensationalism, and foreign policy. Certainly something like that almost didn't happen this year, and I'm not even going to mention what happened this year, but it's an interesting concept. I mean, we've had future revisionist history storylines before. Like, one of the most notable ones to me, one of my favorite episodes of television, is the Boondocks episode where they reveal that in the Boondocks, that Martin Luther King Jr. didn't get killed, but he survived. He was in a coma for almost 32 years, and then woke up in the 2000s. And what would it be like if he was still alive? A really great episode, by the way. If you haven't seen it, go check that out. But with this movie, a good idea on paper, but a botched execution. It's one of those movies that is style over substance. A movie that has a unique idea to it, but the storyline, the way the characters are written, and the way it presents itself is not really that great of an idea. And in fact, it just kind of feels like a movie that's trying to get you with the gimmick, and then when you come out of it, it just feels like you're underwhelmed by what you were expecting from it. And it really is a shame, because there is a good idea here for a mockumentary style film, like something on the lines of, like, the day after, after the events of a nuclear war, or they used to do a lot of these back in the day, like these faux movies that were actually these faux news reports that were disguised as movies, like Without Warning was one of them, about an alien invasion. And then there was one in the 80s, Special Bulletin, which was, I think, the events of a nuclear war, a nuclear war. But those were done much better. Ghost Watch is another perfect example of ones that don't do it well, but this one, not so much. It's one that tries to give up a really good idea, but it plays it way too safe. It's too safe of a concept overall to be anything engaging or entertaining, and it just falls apart really quickly right from the get-go, and it just has nothing of value to it whatsoever when it's all said and done. And it's a shame, because there is a good idea here for something that could be intriguing, engaging, get a lot of topic discussions going on here, but in the end, it just feels like a movie that was only around for the controversy, and then just wanted to get as much money as it could and just back away, because it didn't want to do anything too extreme with the idea. And it's a shame, because there is a good idea here, just bad execution overall. So yeah, not a very good movie. So unfortunately, that's a hard skip on this one. So with that said, let's go ahead and completely change the tone here by looking at our last film that we have here, and that is Romeo and Juliet Sealed with a Kiss. And you may have never heard of this movie, but I had never heard of it either, but I remember it from, of all things, this little beauty here, if you remember old late 2000s YouTube poops.
Oh look, a Montague and a Capulet together.
Capulet and Montague together. Montague and a Capulet together.
It's disgusting.
That is my memory of this movie right here. Nothing about the movie itself, just that YouTube poop itself. That is by the Forbidden Douchebag, by the way, if you've ever followed old YouTube. And that's one of the old videos that I remember watching many times on occasion and laughing my ass off at that, because it's really funny stuff. But the movie itself, Romeo and Juliet Sealed with a Kiss, is a fully animated feature fantasy about two star-crossed seals in warring families that fall in love against their parents' wishes. When Juliet's father gives her her hand in marriage to the monstrous elephant seal prince, Juliet must fake her death in order to be reunited with Romeo. But the plan goes afoul in a desperate race to the end with the help of their friends Friar Lawrence and Kissy the Kissing Fish. Which, that should give you an indication there of how ridiculous this movie is. The day is saved and the young lovers are reunited. Romeo and Juliet Sealed with a Kiss is the ageless tale of love and prejudice set in an undersea world. A film that can be enjoyed by the whole family. That's a synopsis put together by the director of this movie named Phil Niblick. Now, that name may not sound familiar to a lot of you, but you have definitely seen his work before if you've ever watched any old classic Disney movies or Universal films, because this is the guy that worked on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He was also an animator on An American Tale of 50 Goes West. He was actually one of the directors on that movie. He also directed the animation for Casper. He worked on We're Back, a Dinosaur Story, Balto. He's done a ton of stuff for like Wolverine and the X-Men, the TV series, Michael Jackson's Halloween. Just recently he did the Marmaduke series, so he's done a ton of work that you're very familiar with. You may not recognize the name, but you have definitely seen this guy's work before. And the interesting thing about this particular movie is that this is all done by him. This wasn't done by any other animation people. He did this movie on a Wacom tablet directly into Flash 4 in combination with Moho software, and it took 4.5 years to complete and was requiring 112,000 frames. So there's an interesting history behind this movie in general of how it got made and the end result of it. And it's, and for that, I gotta give the guy credit for really going in on that, but it's definitely not a good movie per se. But then again, give the guy his credit for really going in and doing this all on his own. Yeah, it definitely feels like a film made by Macromedia in general, because it does move very choppily. It doesn't really move like a theatrical release does, but it's an overall interesting concept overall to do with the story of Romeo and Juliet with seals. And this isn't like there's been a lot of bad Titanic movies that look very similar to this, but this one, it looked like at least they were trying. We've talked about another movie that was similar to this, Help I'm Fish, which that one, at least that one looked like it was made for and intended for a theatrical release in general. But this movie, you could definitely tell this was made mostly by one person, and it's really gonna falter because it really does feel like a film that was made by one person in general, and it just didn't feel like it was a film that was completely ready for the big screen or not. But it's an interesting concept overall. The execution, though, not that great. Sometimes the animation can look really choppy at times, but then it can look pretty good. You remember, this is made by a guy who did a lot of work at Disney and Universal in their heyday. And yeah, there's a lot of it here that you got to give the guy a lot of credit for. But other than that, though, it is definitely a film that is it's a flawed movie. It's not that great of a movie, but it is a very intriguing film just for the production of it alone. Just seeing this guy putting 4.5 years of his life to work on this movie. And for that, I got to give him credit for it. For all the bad animated movies, like the so bad it's good animated movies like Rhapsody, Street Kids, The Christmas Tree, Help I'm a Fish, those movies we've talked about before. This one is probably the lesser of the bad movies, but it's a movie where I got to give it its proper credit for the fact that this guy put all of his effort into it and made it, finished to accomplish what he did, and the end result is a very, very odd film, to say the least, and one that I say, yeah, I'll give you your points for that, because yeah, you spent the 4.5 years, you made a very interesting film. I just can't say it's a good movie per se. So very mixed opinion on this one, but it's a so bad it's good. It's not really a so bad it's good type of movie, but it is a odd movie that is definitely worth the watch, especially if you like odd animation, to say the least, and especially if you like stupid YouTube poos like this again.
Oh look, a Montague and a Capulet together.
Capulet and Montague together. Montague and Capulet together.
It's disgusting.
And so, on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies, and the next time we meet, we will jump into the holiday season. Halloween is over, so we move into November with 3 big new releases, including Sacha Baron Cohen bringing his character from the Ali G show to life on the big screen in Borat. We also have Tim Allen and Martin Short in the 3rd installment of the Santa Claus series, The Escape Clause, and Hugh Jackman and Kate Winslet leading Aardman Animation's first CG animated film, Flushed Away. So we'll take a look at all 3 of those movies. That'll be coming up on the next episode. That'll be tomorrow. But until then, thank you so much for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page. Check out the previous episode. And also, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notification button so you get updates on when new videos come out, because we post them every day. Now, with all that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time. And until then, as always, take care.